God has a big, kind, human face, or that God is white, brown, black, yellow, green, whatever, or that God listens to our prayers at all times of the day or night, or any time at all. But I said a few prayers for Kayla in the front row of St. Tony's, asking not just that she would survive her wounds, but that she would mend in other important ways. People react differently to life-threatening attacks on their persons, on their family members, on their homes. I know about that firsthand. And now, unfortunately, so did Kayla. While I was in a prayerful mood, I said some private words for Maria, who had been in my thoughts so much lately. I even talked to Maria, whatever that means. I hoped she liked the way I was raising the kids, a frequent subject between us. Then I said a prayer for Nana Mama and her fragile health, prayers for the kids, and even a few words for Rosie the cat, who's been suffering from a severe cold, which I was afraid might be pneumonia. Don't let our cat die. Not now. Rosie's good people too. Chapter 79.
The butcher was in Georgetown to let off a little pent-up steam. Otherwise, things might not go so well when he got back to Caitlin and the kiddies, to his life on the straight and narrow. Actually, he had learned a long time ago that he enjoyed living a double life. Who the hell wouldn't? Maybe another game of red light, green light was in order today. Why not? His war with Junior Maggione was creating a lot of stress for him. The 3,000 block of Q Street where he walked briskly now was nicely tree-lined and dominated by attractive townhouses and even larger manor-like homes. It was mostly an upscale residential area, and the parked cars spoke to the social status and tastes of those who lived here. Several Mercedes, a Range Rover, a BMW, an Aston Martin, a shiny new Bentley or two. For the most part, pedestrian traffic was limited to those entering and leaving their homes. Good deal for his purposes today. He had on earphones and was listening to a band from Scotland that he liked, Franz Ferdinand. Finally, though, he turned off the music and got serious. At the red brick home on the corner of 31st and Q, some kind of elaborate dinner party was apparently being prepped for that evening. Assorted, overpriced goodies were being transported from a stretch van marked Georgetown Valet, and the faux gas lamps in front of the house were being tested by the yardman. The lights seemed to work just fine. Twinkle, twinkle. Then the butcher heard the click-clack of a woman's high heels. The inviting, even intoxicating sound came from up ahead of him on the sidewalk, which was brick rather than pavement, and wound through the neighborhood like a necklace laid out flat on a table. Finally he saw the woman from behind, a fine, shapely thing, with long black hair hanging halfway to her waist. An Irisher like himself? A pretty lassie? No way to tell for certain from the back view, but the chase was on. Soon he'd know as much as he wanted to about her. He felt he was already in control of her fate, that she belonged to him, to the butcher, his powerful alter ego, or perhaps the real him. Who could say? He was getting closer and closer to the raven-haired woman, checking out the narrow alleyways that ran behind some of the larger houses, the patches of woods, looking for a good spot, when he saw a store coming up ahead. What was this? The only place of business he'd encountered for blocks. It almost seemed misplaced in the neighborhood. Sarah's Market, said the sign out front. And then the dark-haired beauty turned inside. Curses. Foiled, the butcher whispered and grinned, and imagined twisting a villain's mustache. He loved this kind of game, this dangerous and provocative cat-and-mouse sort of thing in which he made up all the rules. But his smile instantly faded away, because he saw something else at this Sarah's Market, and that something else was not to his liking. Newspapers were on display, copies of the Washington Post, and you know what? He suddenly remembered that Mr. Bob Woodward himself lived somewhere in the area, but that wasn't the sticky part. His face was the problem, an approximation anyhow, a line drawing of the butcher that wasn't half bad. It was situated above the fold of the Daily News, right where it shouldn't be. famous.
Chapter 80.
This was no laughing matter, though, and Michael Sullivan quickly made his way back to where he'd parked on Q Street. Actually, what had happened was just about the worst development he could imagine. Nothing much seemed to be going his way lately. He sat and calmly pondered the unfortunate situation in the front seat of his Cadillac. He thought about the likely suspects, about the woman who must have told tales out of school about him, possibly given the police a description. He considered that he was being attacked from a couple of sides at once, by the Washington police and the mafia. What to do? What to do? When a partial solution came, it was satisfying and even exhilarating, because it felt like a new game to him. Another twist of the dial. The D.C. police thought that they knew what he looked like, which could be serious trouble, but might also make them sloppy and even overconfident. Mistake. Theirs. Especially if he made the proper counter-moves right now, which he definitely planned to do. But what exactly were those defensive actions he needed to take? The first step took him to Wisconsin Avenue, near Blues Alley, right where he remembered the small shop to be. A barber named Rudy had a chair open for him in mid-afternoon, so Sullivan settled in for a haircut and shave. It was relaxing and mildly enjoyable, actually, wondering what he'd look like afterward, whether he'd like the new him. Another 10 to 12 minutes and the deed was done. Take off the bandages, Dr. Frankenstein. The smallish, rotund barber seemed pleased with himself. If you messed up, you're dead. I'm not kidding, Rudy, the butcher thought to himself. I'll cut you to ribbons with your own straight razor. See what the Washington Post has to say about that. But hey, not so bad. I sort of like it. Think I look a little like Bono. Sonny and Cher? That Bono? Asked Rudy the Dent's. I don't know about that, mister. I think you better looking than Sonny Bono. He's dead, you know. Whatever, said Sullivan, and paid his tab, gave the barber a tip, and got the hell out of there. Next, he drove over to the Capitol Hill neighborhood in D.C. He'd always liked the area, found it a turn-on. Most people's image of the Capitol was the graceful steps and terraces of the west facade. But on the east side, behind the Capitol and the Supreme Court and Library of Congress buildings, was a bustling residential neighborhood that he knew fairly well. I've passed this way before. The butcher walked through Lincoln Park, which had an exceptional view of the Capitol dome now that the leaves were falling away. He smoked a cigarette and reviewed his plan in front of the somewhat bizarre Emancipation Memorial, which featured a slave breaking out of chains while Lincoln read the Emancipation Proclamation. Lincoln, a good man by most accounts. Myself, a very bad man. Wonder how that happens, he wondered. A few minutes later, he was breaking into a house on C Street. He just knew this was the bitch who had talked about him. He felt it in his bones, in his blood. And soon, he'd know for sure. He found Mina Sunderland tucked away in her adorable little kitchen. She was dressed in jeans, an immaculate white tee, scuffed up clogs, making pasta for one while she sipped a glass of red wine. Cute as a button, he thought to himself. Did you miss me, Mina? I missed you. And you know what? I almost forgot how pretty you are. But I won't forget you again, darling girl. I brought a camera to take your picture this time. You're going to be in my prize photo collection after all. Oh, yes, you are. And he gave her the first cut with his scalpel.
Chapter 81. I was still inside the church when my cell phone went off, and it was trouble near the Capitol. I said a quick prayer for whoever was in jeopardy, and a prayer that we would catch the killer rapist soon. Then I left St. Anthony's on the run. Sampson and I rushed to the neighborhood behind the Capitol building in his car with the siren blaring, lights flashing on the rooftop. Yellow crime scene tape was strung up everywhere by the time we arrived. The scene, the backdrop of important government buildings, couldn't have been more dramatic, I thought, as Sampson and I hurried up the 4 stone front steps of a brownstone. Is he putting on a show for us? Is he doing it on purpose? Or did it just happen this way? I heard a car alarm whining and glanced back toward the street. What a strange, curious sight. Police, news reporters, a growing crowd of looky-loos. Fear was plainly stamped on many of the faces, and I couldn't help thinking that this was a familiar tableau of the age. This look of fear, this terrible state of fear that the whole country seemed to be caught up in. Maybe the entire world was afraid right now. Unfortunately, it was even worse inside the brownstone. The crime scene was already being tightly controlled by somber-faced homicide detectives and techies, but Sampson was let inside. He overrode a sergeant's objections and brought me along. Into the kitchen we went. The unthinkable murder scene. The killer's workshop. I saw poor Mina Sunderland where she lay on the reddish-brown tile floor. Her eyes were rolled back to the whites, and they seemed pinned to a point on the ceiling. But Mina's eyes weren't the first thing I noticed. Oh, what a bastard this killer was! A carving knife was stuck in her throat, poised like a deadly stake. There were multiple wounds on the face, deep, unnecessarily vicious cuts. Her top, a white tee, had been torn away. Her jeans and panties had been pulled down around the ankles, but hadn't been stripped off. One of her shoes was on, one off, a pale blue clog lying on its side in blood. Sampson looked at me. "Alex, what are you getting? Tell me." "Not much. Not so far." "I don't think he bothered to rape her," I said. "Why? He pulled down her pants." I knelt over Mina's body. Nature of the wounds. All this blood, the disfigurement. He was too angry at her. He told her not to talk to us, and she disobeyed him. That's what this is about. I think so. We might have gotten her killed, John. Sampson reacted angrily. "Alex, we told her not to come back here yet. We offered her surveillance, protection. What more could we do?" I shook my head. "Left her alone, maybe. Caught the killer before he got to her. Something else, John. Anything but this." Chapter 82. So now we were investigating the case for Mina Sunderland, too. In her memory. At least that was what I told myself. That was my rationalization. This was for Maria Cross and Mina Sunderland and all the others. For the next 3 days I worked closely with Sampson during the day, and then went out on the street with him at night. Our night shift usually took place from 10 until around 2. We were part of the task force patrolling Georgetown and Foggy Bottom, areas where the rapist-killer had struck before. Emotions were running high, but no one wanted him more than I did. Still, I was trying my best to keep the very tense investigation in some kind of perspective and control. Almost every night I managed to have dinner with Nana and the kids. I checked in with Kayla Coles in North Carolina, and she sounded better. I also conducted half a dozen sessions with my patients, including Kim Stafford, who was coming to see me twice a week and maybe even making some progress. Her fiancé had never mentioned our talk to her. My morning ritual included grabbing a coffee at the Starbucks, which was right in my building, or at the Au Bon Pain on the corner of Indiana and 6th. The problem with Au Bon Pain was that I liked their pastries too much, so I had to stay clear of the place as much as I could. Kim was my favorite patient. Therapists usually have favorites, no matter how much they rationalize that they don't. "Remember I told you that Jason wasn't such a bad guy?" she said about 15 minutes into our session one morning. I remembered, and I also recalled cleaning his clock pretty good at the station house where he worked. "Well, he was pure, unadulterated garbage, Dr. Cross. I figured that much out. Took me a lot longer than it should have." I nodded and waited for more to come. I knew exactly what I wanted to hear from her next. "I moved out on him. I waited until he went to work, then I left. The truth? I'm scared to death, but I did what I had to do." She got up and went to the window, which looked out onto Judiciary Square.